welcome back, Julie, and
Hi.
welcome everyone to Streaming 101C, some tips and tricks. This is now the third part in the inaugural kickoff series covered where we've been covering streaming. I want to thank Paula from Highline for joining us today, and I'll have her contact information at the end should anyone want to reach out to her. And just as a reminder, the Highline Academy is part of Highline's really larger program to provide educational resources, training, and to close the digital divide in Michigan, particularly in the UP and the Thumb. So Julie, as always, interrupt me. This is supposed to be interactive, and since you've got me to yourself, feel free to stop me as we move along here.
Okay.
I always like to show this because this continues to change. This happens to be the median internet speed throughout the United States right now for a fixed broadband connection. So think fiber, DSL, or coaxial cable from your cable company. Right now, the median speed is 237. I think it's jumped about 40 megabits since the last time, which means half the country is getting faster speeds than 237 and half the country is getting slower speeds when they do a speed test at speedtest.net, which is really run by Ookla. And as always, you know, at Highline, you can get a gigabit service. So that's about 5 times faster than that median speed throughout the United States. Now, in the previous 2 sessions, we've talked about streaming, about applications, what you can stream, how you can stream. So really in this session, we wanted to dig down more into the technology of where we like to watch what we're streaming, and that's really on our televisions, right? I mean, that's really our biggest screen. It's great to watch things, you know, on our little phones, but you don't really get the greatest experience, right? You want to be able to sit back and watch it on the big TV. So that means you're going to need a TV, right? So maybe it's time to upgrade, right? You've got that TV, you've got your streaming going, and you think, you know, now we could get a better resolution and maybe even a lot more inches in the size of that screen. What should I be looking for? Number one, and arguably the most important thing, is to make sure that you get a 4K television. High definition televisions for a while have really been that 1080p, and there's a limitation with 1080p where really its best picture is about the 35 to 40 inch range. You could get TVs sometimes up to 50 inches in 1080p standard high definition. But there's really tricks that they do with chips to make that possible. When 4K televisions were introduced, that really allowed the 50-inch to 75-inch televisions to become available with those really beautiful pictures. So if you're in the market now, you're going to want a 4K. And the reality is really anytime you're in a store now, that's usually the minimum that they're offering is a 4K television. So one, just make sure it's 4K. And keep in mind too that 4K looks a lot better when you're gaming and when you're watching sports compared to 1080p. There are some newer 8K televisions which have even much greater resolution and are allowing for much bigger screen sizes. But here's the deal. You're going to pay a lot more for that. And there's really not a lot of 8K content out there yet. There's really no place to get it. You might be able to enjoy it if you have a Blu-ray player. I'm 46, 47, who's counting? I don't think I remember the last time I was at someone's home and they said, let's watch this movie using my Blu-ray. So the reality is 4K is going to have you covered. Make sure it's a 4K television. Now there's another number that you'll see with the 4K, and that's usually what's called the hertz, and it'll be 60 hertz or 120 hertz. You don't want anything lower than 60 hertz. Now that hertz is the refresh rate. The refresh rate of a TV measured in hertz refers to the number of times per second the display resets the message or the image. So at 60, you can essentially look at it as there's 60 pictures you're actually seeing each second, 60 frames per second. And at 120 hertz, 120 frames per second. Obviously, 120 is better than 60. The reality is that 4K 60 looks pretty amazing at the 50-inch to 75-inch models for television. But if you're somebody who wants to have the top of the line, then you would want to look at 120 hertz refresh rate. Another factor to consider when buying a television, and we'll talk a little bit more about HDMI cables in a minute, are the number of HDMI ports on the back of your television. Why? Well, two reasons. One, you're going to have devices connected to that television. Maybe it's an Apple TV, maybe it's a Fire Stick, maybe you're connecting it directly to your router if it happens to be close to it, etc. And you want to be able, and you might have a soundbar, and I'll talk about that. And those are all going to go into these HDMI ports. So if you're limited for whatever reason in that model of television that you're buying, that means you're going to be limited to the number of devices you can connect. There are separate devices you can buy that allow you to essentially connect all the devices to like a connector or a switch, and then use one of these ports on the back of the television. The problem with that, though, is it's a little clunky for two reasons. One, you have to manage then the devices connected on that switch. So think, I want to watch something on my Apple TV, and that's device number 1 on my switch. And now I want to watch something from my Fire Stick, and that's on number 2 on my switch, and that's connected to one HDMI port on my television. Well, you have to select it from the switch selector and make sure you're also correctly selecting it from the HDMI port on your television. Now, is it the end of the world? No, but it just makes it a little clunky. There's also a challenge, though, of the weakest link, right? You're connecting a device, a streaming device, to your television, right? So you've got that device, you've got your television, and then you have a HDMI cable, which I'm going to talk about. If you stick something else in the middle of that, that's just another point where you can have a weak link. And so you might have a high-end device and a high-end television and high-end cables connecting it together, but you have a low-end switch, and that can cause problems with your picture or your sound. So that's why you just kind of want the HDMI ports built into the television. It looks cleaner, you have less clutter, and often just leads to a better experience. Now, if you are upgrading your television, particularly an older model, if you have one of those bigger box models, but really any television now, we're all recognizing that they're amazingly thin, and they seem to only be getting thinner. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But there is a drawback to getting thinner and thinner TVs. That means you don't have any room for speakers, right? When we had big box televisions, you could have big box speakers in there. Now, when these TVs are this thick, well, where can you have the speaker, right? How big can that speaker be? And there's only so much you can do, even with technology, with putting out immersive, deep, loud sound that's reverberating to match this big 50, 60, 75-inch screen that you have, right? So that means you're going to want to get a sound bar. And that's, that is an additional cost. And so a sound bar is really what it sounds like. It's really, this is a sound bar. Would connect via HDMI to your television, your new thin fancy TV, right? And I'm going to show you some options here that tend to exist out there, say even at your local Best Buy. But one thing that I would recommend is that you get one with a wireless subwoofer. Some sound bars it's just the sound bar that you can buy, and it has a subwoofer built into the sound bar. But if you have a wireless subwoofer that comes with it, it is so much better. And you notice it when you're watching, or you want to hear that bass in a movie. Think of when the dinosaur is walking in Jurassic Park, or the Transformers transforming. You can almost feel the reverberations in your couch or your recliner with that wireless subwoofer. And it really does make the experience just that much greater. And you think, great, I'm going to get a new TV, now I got to go buy a soundbar. How much does that cost? They're actually quite affordable. So I just went to Best Buy and I said, what's available today in the store? I don't want to look for ordering stuff that you have to ship. Just what do you have in the store right now? And I sorted it by 3 different ways: by the best rated, the lowest cost, and the best selling. However it is, Best Buy defines that. And it just so happens that Samsung was all the three options, and they had three different models. And you can see the price range here from $120 to essentially $300. So, you know, it doesn't break the bank, but it is an extra expense in getting that new TV. You're arguably going to want a soundbar and one with a wireless subwoofer, as these two options have. Now, there are some soundbars out there that cost $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. Those are super high-end soundbars. And if you're an audiophile and also maybe want to link your phone and so you can, you know, play your music out of that, hey, that's one thing. But let me tell you, I've got a general Sony soundbar. It sounds amazing. I can connect my phone to it as well and play music. And it sounds like I have multiple speakers. And that soundbar probably costing about $150 a couple years ago. So you can get by with something in that price range and really have some great sound coming out of your TV while you're streaming. Now, another option you're going to have to consider when buying a television is, should I get an LCD, a QLED, or an OLED? Right? You'll see those words on the TVs as you're walking through and looking at all the screens in the store. So it's important to know what's the difference here, right? What does all this mean? Why should I care? What am I buying, right? Well, here's how CNET breaks it down. OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. And that's essentially exactly what it does. That means each pixel in the screen lights up by itself, okay? Organic light emitting diode. Now, QLED, and it says according to Samsung, and I'll explain that in a minute here, but Sony actually developed the quantum dot LED technology with another company. But then Samsung now owns the trademark to quantum dot. But it stands for quantum dot LED TV. And it's essentially an LCD LED with quantum dots, so much smaller dots. But it still has a backlight like an LCD. So an LCD TV and a QLED TV need lights in the back to light up the little pixels so that you can see them. And when there's a dark part of the screen or a black in the screen, the light needs to go out. An OLED, on the other hand, the individual pixel lights up or turns off to create darks or lights and to show you color, okay? Now, in the end, what that means is that OLED tends to make much richer blacks. And it's very noticeable when you have an OLED and a QLED or an LCD together, that if you're watching the same picture, the same movie, that the darks just look richer and cleaner on there than they do on QLED or LCD TVs. Now, liquid crystal displays, they've been around forever. Most of our monitors used to be LCD, you know, or are LCD monitors. It's a very proven technology, but again, it uses a backlight to illuminate the screen. They tend to be more affordable. And, you know, they do use some more power compared to OLED and QLED, but they're bezel-less, meaning there's really not a whole lot of side, you know, on the side of the television. You know, almost the screen can go the full length, and the pictures can be quite beautiful. But if I'm being honest, QLED is better than LCD because it's really taking LCD to the next level with quantum dots, and OLED is arguably better than QLED, but it does have some drawbacks. And so let's just consider why that might be. Well, first with QLED, it uses a special LED backlight system, and it can have 2, 4, 6, 8 backlights, or maybe even 30 or 40 backlights in the back of that television so that you can have dark areas and more lit areas. Again, it just depends on the model that you're getting. And that's why it's good to kind of usually look at the television or look at the screen in the store to make sure it's going to produce the kind of picture that you're happy with. Now, again, 7 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, you're going to be quite happy with whatever you get, even if you just bought it online. But if you're someone who really wants to see that difference in the picture and know that's going to be your TV for the next, who knows, 6, 8, 10 years, there is something about being in the store and just seeing it, seeing it presented. Now with OLED, again, this is the organic light emitting, where each pixel turns on and off by itself, the light within it. Really allows for those deeper blacks. It also allows for a better viewing angle. So you'll notice sometimes if you're at someone's house and you're looking at the television, sometimes if you get too off to the side and you're looking at the screen, it kind of fades out a little bit, right? You almost have like a tunnel where the best seat is the one right in front of it. That tends to be the case with LCD. QLED makes improvements on that, but is still affected by that, where sometimes there are angles that you just doesn't see, like the color starts to look off just because of the way the technology is. Well, with OLED, you can pretty much be anywhere and you're going to see that perfect picture and contrast regardless, because it's not using a backlight or backlights to light up the picture. So it's not affected by your angle because that individual pixel is lit up by itself. And so that is something that's noticeable. Now, what's a challenge with OLEDs? One, in the 50 to 65 inch size television range, they're very comparable in price to QLED. But once you get over 65 inches in OLED, the price tends to skyrocket. And it's just because of how they make these televisions. They do cost more. Sometimes they're thousands and thousands of dollars more once you get over the 65 inch size. But in the 50 to 65 inch range, they're very comparable. OLED can also, unfortunately, result in what's called burn-in. Because if you think about it, like any light that you turn on and turn off, eventually that light can burn out. Now, with LCD and QLED, you have backlights, right? But with the OLED, it's that individual pixel turning on. So if you always have a pixel on, well, you're going to, burn it out over time, or might burn out at a different rate. And you would think, well, when would that happen? It's not like I'm just going to leave the screen on pause. Sure, you wouldn't want to do that. And the manufacturers know about that. So they know to kind of have a screen that comes on and things are moving around if you pause your TV for too long. But think like, for example, if you always watch ESPN, or you're always watching CNN or Fox News, something that has a chyron or a logo always in the corner of the screen. Well, that means that those particular pixels are always going to be on and always one color, right? And that can then mean that particular area of the screen eventually burns out faster than other parts, or just burns out, period. Now, it's not something that I have ever heard of happening, but it's clearly something that people talk about. It's just something to consider. So if you're somebody who watches a particular network that has, say, a chyron running or a logo on the screen all the time, might be something you'd want to consider. So in summary, LCD uses a backlight with liquid crystals. QLED is really a step up from LCD with quantum dots, and OLED is those self-lit pixels. And I'll tell you, I don't have an OLED. I would love to have one. I think my next TV personally would be an OLED, but that burn-in is something that people do talk about. Again, I've never heard of anyone running into that issue, but it is what it is. So, any questions there, Julie or Paula?
Did you say the pricing for the LED is a lot more or similar? I didn't catch the beginning.
For QLED and OLED, they're quite similar up to 50 to 65 inches. But once you get over 65 inches, OLED pricing for whatever reason, it really skyrockets. But 65 inches is pretty big. I think 75 inches is usually what people have as the biggest television in their house right now, unless you're talking about a theater, right?
Right.
So, there's that. But you get 4K televisions now that are 50 inches, sometimes for like $200.
Yeah, I see that.
it's not, is it the top of the line? Does it have multiple HDMI ports? Maybe not, but they still often look really great. I mean, it's like, who are we kidding here? They do look great. It's just a matter of, do you want to get the best or really see that difference? It's like when somebody's in your house, they're like, wow, that's a beautiful picture, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's why we're covering this. This is the deeper streaming tips and tricks.
Yeah. Well, like when you go to Best Buy or somewhere and you see them all together, you can definitely see differences
That's
in the
right.
quality.
And sometimes it's good just to get out there just so you can kind of see it yourself, and then you can go home and maybe do some research and know, I saw there's a difference. And obviously there's some companies, there's some common names. Samsung in particular is really the leader in quantum dots. But there, obviously, LG has really come up over the last 10, 15 years, and become a leader in television. Sony is still there. They don't always have the award-winning sets. I've got a Sony television though. It was actually quite affordable when I got it 4 years ago. So, but it is something to be in there just to kind of see and compare.
Mhm.
So let's talk about the cables, right? Because you've got the television, and then you need to connect it to your Apple TV, your Fire Stick, your Chrome device, your gaming system. Who knows? Could be anything that you're connecting, right? That you're trying to watch things from. And in the beginning, it was really simple, right? You just buy one, right? You need an HDMI cable. Let me get one. Well, now there's lots of versions. And we need to keep that in mind, because what can happen is if you don't have the latest standard, which really means that it can send more data along that cable, you might lose out on some either features or functionality. Your picture might not work, or your sound might not work so well, if it works at all. You're like, well, that's a problem, right? Want it to work. So HDMI stands for high definition multimedia interface. And it's really just sending the data, right? The data from that device to your television, and sometimes even back to the device. One thing to keep in mind when you're buying a cable, you want to get this standard HDMI 2.1. That should be more than sufficient for anything that we're talking about today, even for the latest gaming consoles that want to take advantage of the best resolution that you might be getting on your television. But HDMI 2.1. And just keep in mind, this obviously is what you connect your things to, how you connect your TV to those things. But as I said, there are different standards out there, different versions, right? And you'll often see this wording or naming on the HDMI packaging, and it'll say standard or high speed HDMI or premium or ultra high speed. Now, these are backwards compatible, meaning you can usually, with no problem, buy a higher standard and it'll work with lower standard devices. So, for example, Apple will tell you, and I'll show you this in a minute, they actually just recommend you get the ultra high speed cable. Now, it's capable of doing 8K at 60 hertz. You're not going to be getting 8K at 60 hertz from your 4K Apple TV, much less if you don't have an 8K television, right? But it's also capable of doing 4K at 120 and 4K at 160, which means you just cross everything off and therefore you're okay, right? So the one thing to keep in mind from this slide alone is there are different standards of HDMI cables. At minimum, get a premium high-speed cable, if not an ultra high-speed cable. And I'm going to show you one in a minute, how much they cost. You can get them for like $25. It doesn't break the bank. But what can happen is that you can find out, and I'll show you in a minute, where even your Apple TV will say, hey, you're not getting the best that you can because of the cable that you're using. And so just to avoid that, it's just better to get the higher standard. You should also know that there are also 3 connector types. There's the standard, and that's what we're talking about here for televisions. There's also a mini, and there's also a micro. And the standard, you can imagine, are for bigger devices like TVs and computer monitors. The mini is used for things like camcorders and laptops, and then the micro for notebook computers and maybe action cameras, that kind of thing. They all do the same thing. It's just a different connection, right? Because I feel like sometimes these companies want to make money with different connections. But obviously you can see the utility of having a smaller connection for smaller devices. But for our purpose, it'll be this standard device for our televisions. And here's what Apple says. So it's kind of funny. It says, number one, use the correct input and settings. Well, thanks a lot, Apple. That's great advice, right? But it says, depending on your TV, you may need to use a different HDMI input on your TV for high quality 4K or HDR video. And this HDR stands for high dynamic range. And so sometimes you'll notice I said you want one that has many ports, and sometimes those HDMI ports have little designations that say that they're special, right? And it's just keeping that in mind. So you want to connect your special device using the special port, whereas maybe the other HDMI ports are just standard ports where these are going to allow for higher data transfer. And so that might be why you see an error message, or why you're like, well, I have a 4K television that does 120 hertz, but it's saying I can only use 60 hertz for some reason. But I have a 4K 120. Why am I only be able to watch a 4K at 60 hertz? And it could be because your cable isn't allowing for that. So that's something to keep in mind. Apple also says if there's an issue, you can actually run a test. Now, I'm just giving you an example of Apple because that's the one I primarily use. But from your Apple 4K television, when you're clicking around in the settings, you can actually run a 2-minute test to check your HDMI connection to give you information about whether or not maybe it's your cable that's preventing something. Also on some televisions, you actually have to go into the settings and select the higher resolution rates or higher video rates manually. So that's also something to keep in mind. So if you're setting up a new television, you will want to spend a couple minutes going through your settings and saying, hey, I got a 4K television that does this. Am I actually on that in the settings? Because you can downgrade what your monitor, what your television is showing. You want to make sure that by default you're at the highest, and is it working there? Then stay there. And then if for some reason it's not, then you can tighter down and see what might be an issue. Apple itself just says, we just recommend you get the Belkin ultra high speed HDMI cable and just be done with it. And it just so happens they sell it. And so just so you can see, what that kind of runs with them, I think it's $30, right? You can get it. And of course, sometimes you might get it cheaper from Best Buy, but that's the kind of investment that we're talking about in the cable. And you'll notice that this cable made by Belkin in this case supports up to 7680 by 4320 resolution. So think of that as almost like the resolution, right? Almost length times width in a way. It's not exactly that, but you can consider it that way. Now a Apple 4K TV, when I say Apple TV 4K, that's just the box, right? That you connect to your TV. It only supports a resolution of 4096 by 2160. Well, that's obviously smaller than this. So this cable is capable of doing more than even the Apple TV 4K can put out. But because it's more capable, it's more than sufficient, right? And it's not the cable that's going to give you a problem. Ergo, Apple says, just get this one, be done with it, and you won't have any issues. All right, so we've got to cover television. What do I want to look for in a TV? How do I connect my stuff to that TV? When is the best time to buy a TV, right? Well, it's actually very cyclical, but I didn't want to give a rundown. So you can always feel confident that you're not getting robbed, that it's a good time to buy a television. And surprisingly, there's actually a lot of times throughout the year that it's quite fine to buy a TV. You're going to be getting a good deal no matter where it is. So how does it work, right? How do TVs, when do they come out? When do they get discounted? Well, you should know that TVs and TV deals all begin in an annual cycle, and it begins with this show called CES in January, where new televisions are unveiled. CES stands for the Consumer Electronics Show, and it is massive. And it's organized by the Consumer Technology Association. Arguably one of the most influential tech events in the world. It's attended by people from all over the world, and new televisions are showcased there, right? The big manufacturers come out and they say, look at our fancy new model that can do X, Y, and Z more than last year. So they unveil it in January. That means they're releasing it in February, March, or April, which means they got to get rid of the old stuff. So those TVs, the new TVs, when they come out, that's the most expensive they're ever going to be because they just got released. The ones that are going to be discounted are last year's models or maybe even year prior models if they still have those in the store. So in general, February, March, and April, as the shipments of new TVs are coming in, retailers want to get rid of the old stuff. So you're going to see some discounts around that time. But there's one event that precedes this, and it's in the same month of January, or rather it's in February, but it means in January is when the big sales are. Can you guess what that is, Julie? We just had it. An annual event in February. I'll give you a hint, it's a sporting event.
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. Exactly right. We got the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Super Bowl literally affects TV sales, okay? And you're going to get the best sales during the final weeks of the season. The Super Bowl is normally held the first Sunday in February. So retailers know that. So we're in January, near the end of January. CES just happened. The new stuff's about to come in. The Super Bowl's coming. And people want to have a great Super Bowl party. And why? Well, regardless of how you feel about the Super Bowl, we all know that people will watch the Super Bowl just to watch the commercials, right? Because it is one of the biggest watched event every year in the United States. In fact, I Googled and Wikipedia showed the top 20 watched things, and all of them are Super Bowls. Look at this, except one of show, and I'll talk about that in a second. Everything's a Super Bowl, top 20. And the last 2 years were the last two most watched things. So just this one that just happened had the most eyeballs on it than any show in the history of the United States, had over 123 million viewers. And the one before that happened to have 115, but then it dropped down to 2015 for the next biggest. But you can see why this drives TV sales. And it's kind of funny, just a little bit of history here. MASH, you might be familiar with it, but their series finale called Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, I mean, that aired over 4 decades ago. It is still in the top 20, and it is the only one in the top 20 that's not a Super Bowl. So again, it tells you why that helps drive TV sales, that one sporting event. Now, we've all likely heard of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. You often get great deals during Black Friday and Cyber Monday. But the biggest discounts are normally with like no-name brands or lower end models from name brands. But this is the start of the Christmas holiday season, and they want to get you into their store. We know that they'll often offer these like flash sales where it's like some particular device is ridiculously discounted. But again, it's often for a no-name brand or an entry-level model of a name brand. But in any event, you can get a great deal around that time. I don't know if I mentioned this in a previous training, but we should all remember that gigantic discounts are actually not the norm with televisions because they really don't have much of a markup to begin with. Most of the largest manufacturers don't allow retailers to offer their own pricing. It's called unilateral pricing policy. So what a manufacturer says, think Sony as a manufacturer, it says, imagine this is a TV, like this model of TV, you can't sell it for less than $400. You can sell it for more than $400, but you can't sell it for less than $400. Now, the retailer is not required to sign a contract on that. But what Sony tells retailers is, if you do sell it for less than that, then we're not going to sell you our televisions. Why do they do that, right? Well, from Sony's perspective, they want you, if you happen to be, say, in a Best Buy and you're looking at a Sony television and you like it, they just want you to buy it. They don't want you to think, well, maybe I should go to Costco and look at the Sony over there. Or maybe Target has a better deal on that Sony. Or maybe Amazon has a better deal on the Sony. They're like, just buy it here. Okay, that's from their perspective. They don't want people doing that, because what that means, arguably, is then you're looking at other televisions, right? So if you already like what you're looking at, know that you're probably getting a comparable price from anywhere else. Fair enough? And so that's why they do that, and that's something to keep in mind. Now, how do retailers get around that? I like to go to Costco, right? Some people like to go to Sam's Club. Now, what Costco will do is they'll say, we've all heard of, say, like a Dyson vacuum. And you think, okay, Costco's selling a Dyson vacuum. How is that different from if I go to Dyson.com? Or how is that different if I get that same Dyson on Amazon.com? Well, what Costco will do so that it can offer its own model is it actually takes the same model of a vacuum, but it says for our version, it's going to have some extra accessories that are only included at the Costco Dyson model. That's the exact same one you can get at Target and the exact same one you can get on Dyson.com, but we've got 3 different accessories, so therefore it overall has a different model number. And because of that, we can say it's cheaper because you're getting more for the same price. Right. And so that's why sometimes you'll be like, why can I only find this model number at Walmart? And I know that that same kind of TV is also at Best Buy. Well, it probably is a very similar TV. But what Walmart said is, if you want to offer that TV here, you've got to give us one version that we can sell for less. So maybe take a feature out that we think nobody wants to use anyway. Otherwise, it's the same television, right? That's how the retailers get around the universal pricing policy. It's a little inside baseball on how that works. Another big sale day, obviously, Amazon Prime Day. We hear about it. If we're Prime members, we're paying for the shipping. We also then get to take advantage of Amazon Prime Day, right? An exclusive shopping event for Amazon Prime subscribers. Often happens in the summer, normally in mid-July. It lasts for a couple days, and you're going to get some good sales at that point directly from Amazon. And this almost goes without saying, but before holiday weekends, we're all used to like the Labor Day sales, those kinds of things, Memorial sales. And as again I said, it's cyclical. Starts off in January. You got that Super Bowl coming up in the first Sunday of February. The new TVs are coming out in February, March, and April, or rather they're getting delivered to the retailers. So they got to get rid of that shelf space of the old stuff. So you might get discounts on the older models. And really the videos are really, in my opinion, already so good. You can really get a great screen for a good price really throughout the year when you think about it. So we have touched on streaming content before, and I wanted to kind of end here with that because you already spent all this money, right? You bought a new television. You might have had to buy a streaming device. You had to buy an HDMI cable or HDMI cables. And then you're like, James said I had to get a soundbar with a wireless subwoofer. I mean, I don't have any money to pay for the streaming service. Well, as a reminder, there is free streaming stuff out there. And, just a quick run through. Amazon does have Freevee. And formerly IMDb TV. We're talking, almost thousands of options out there of movies and TV shows and stuff from throughout the world, even international programming. Even the stuff that's on Prime, like what Amazon is paying to produce, is now even available for free, and it's technically for free for anybody. It's just, and it's ad supported, so you're gonna have to watch some commercials, but it's free, and so you can get a lot of great free content there. There's also the Roku channel, and it has that free channel. So you, even if you don't have a Roku device, you can still just download the Roku app onto your phone and watch the free stuff that Roku has without having a, without paying for a Roku service or paying for a Roku device. So, there's free stuff out there. 350 live TV channels. Is it the most compelling content? I might not think so, but you have 350 live options out there for free. You might find some stuff that's worthwhile for yourself. There's also Pluto TV, and I'm showing the graphics here so you can see, there's stuff that you recognize. You're like, oh, that's for free. It's just literally, I just have to go to it and watch it. That's exactly right. Doesn't require, oftentimes these don't even require a subscription, and so lets you really take advantage of that device that you've got. So Pluto.tv. There's also Tubi, at tubi.com. And I just wanted to show the menu here because Tubi, we're talking, 50,000 movies and TV shows. Okay, 50,000. 200 live channels. Okay, for free. It's got ads, so that's there. And this is only a small snapshot of the menu to see how you can dig down into different genres and topics of what's available, again, for free. So check it out, tubi.tv. And last is Crackle. Crackle is also a free service. Full-length movies, TV shows. It even has original programming. And Crackle.com, you can watch it from your computer screen. You can download the app from your streaming device to watch it on your television or get it on your phone. Free stuff out there, free movies. Quite impressive. Now, here is a website I would recommend you go to, and it's called thestreamable.com. And it offers a lot of information and news and what's hot in streaming, from the actual things that you're streaming, like the movies and the shows, to the devices, to if you have a VPN, which is a virtual private network, which will be a topic that we're going to do a session on if you have one or why you might want to get one. But and how that could affect your viewing experience or the internet speeds that you're getting. The Streamable covers all that from a streaming perspective. But what's cool is that from the homepage, you can literally, for example, you say, I want to watch this show. I've got all these, I got an Apple TV, I got a Crackle account, I got Amazon Prime, I got, DirecTV account here, and I got over there. Where do I go first to find if I just want to watch the Batman, right? I just made that up, right? But I did a search for the purposes of this session. So I've typed in the Batman. How do you watch it? Well, this is literally, it just pulls it up right for you, and it tells you that you can watch it on demand right now on Max or on Netflix. So if you're already a Max or a Netflix subscriber, you can just start watching it. And of course, if you don't have the service, you can pay $9.90 a month or get a free trial and then watch the Batman for free. Or sign up for Netflix, right? And their plans start at $6.99. But that's if it's on demand, right? That means if you're already paying for a monthly subscription to a streaming service. Well, what if you just want to rent or buy it? So then I clicked rent or buy, and it says, hey, you can rent or buy this movie right now for as little as $3.99, or buy the movie for $14.99 on Prime Video, Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, Vudu, and it shows you all the options out there. So then okay, that's where I know where to go. But if you remember, Julie, from my last session, the higher end models of the streaming devices that you might be using, right? Whether it's the Apple TV remote that you can speak into, or any of the other remotes from the other providers where you can speak into them, you can often just press the button and say from the general screen, the Batman. and it'll tell you on there where you can watch the Batman as well, right? That's another option. Does it always work as seamlessly? Sometimes not. I would argue 8 times out of 10, I'm perfectly happy just yelling into my remote and it takes me where I want to go.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll go to Streamable and it just makes it a lot easier because it, lays it all out. And, maybe sometimes if there's a difference in price, say, you're just going to see it here than having to go check it out on your TV. So, and local channels, and this is actually a screenshot from the Streamable on just showing you how the pay subscription services, what they offer, just to show you, because a lot of times we want local channels, particularly if we're trying to cut the cord, and the pricing for that. So, you're still getting into about the $80 range to get local channels included in a streaming service, whether it's through DirecTV or YouTube TV, etc. But you can see there, that's just the kind of information that's available. And, I'm curious, Julie, because we mentioned this last time, did you happen to go to mybundle.tv and, play around and see what services might be best for you?
I did look at it, yeah.
Okay. Well, for anyone else watching in the future, you should definitely check this out. In this case, Highline is partnered with mybundle.tv, so you can go to /Highline/home, and you can put in what it is that you like to watch, what kinds of programming you want to watch, and helps narrow down all the options that are out there. And it shows you then, like in a matrix, well, then these options make the best sense for you. Because it just seems like we have so many options now. It's like, where do we begin, and how do we know? And it's to the point now where my kids will sit down in the morning and eat breakfast, and they'll want to watch a show on Hulu. But by the end of the day, they're watching something on YouTube Live, and I'm watching something on Netflix. And we're just bouncing around on all the different services. And then don't even get me into the shared accounts of people who visit my house who signed into their stuff and they forgot to sign out. I'm not saying that, but I think that happens. And so then those platforms are available to me. And so we have a lot of options now. And I'll tell you, just for that little inside baseball or a little tip, this is actually a great service. The Streamable, it's free. You don't have to create an account. You just start reading stories. There's interesting content there, and it does help you find where movies or shows are available. There are other services out there. I just personally like the Streamable.
It looks good.
With that, we've got Paula's email here, so if anybody wants to sign up for future sessions. But Julie, anything I can cover again, or any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just learned a lot, though. That was interesting. I didn't know about the cables and all that.